All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan with James Gray. This is going to be a stellar podcast. I have a gentleman here today that really has a broad perspective on this life. He's had some of the highest highs, probably some low lows, you know what I mean? But that makes life beautiful. So before we get into it, we want to shout out VetLife. As always, VetLife has been a sponsor standing by us. They are a company of veterans that are there for veterans. Everybody knows a veteran that has been on active duty that's probably struggled to transition back to normal society. And that's a difficult process. You leave camaraderie, you leave brotherhood, you leave structure, and you try to come back to the chaos that can be normal society. For the people that you know that might need a hand transitioning back to normal life, or that are owed benefits or different things that, you know, can be difficult to acquire, please don't hesitate to reach out to VetLife or contact me, contact Josh Parrish directly, and we'll help you get started. So you can reach out to VetLife on Instagram or on Facebook, or simply just go to vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Eric Hipple. Eric Hipple is a gentleman that played for the Detroit Lions, went in the fourth round of the 1980 draft, a gentleman that's truly experienced the pinnacle of sports and has a great story. So, Eric, for the people that don't know you or are not familiar with you, let's take us way back. Take us back to, young childhood and tell a little bit about your story up to that point.
Well, I was born in Lubbock, Texas, and didn't stay much time there. My father he was actually what they call a mud tester for the oil company. So he'd go around to all the different oil wells and test the viscosity. And so he moved. So we went from Lubbock to New Mexico, and then up to Northern California. And then he finally settled down in Southern California when that's where I went to first grade. So anyway, so from that point forward, I was down in Southern California. Downey is the name of it. And I was one of those kids that was like a late developer. I mean, I don't want to use the word innocence, but that's kind of how I felt. I felt like I was always kind of looking around and trying to see where do I fit in. And so when I got to the age of sports and my dad signed me up for football, and I went out for it. And man, we had drills back then. It was just like run down this line head to head and just bang heads. And I remember my head was down and my neck, and so the following year I didn't want to go out. And so my dad's going, well, then you talk to the coach. And so he made me get on the phone and talk to the coach. And the coach convinced me to come back out. We don't do that drill anymore, whatever it was. I can't remember. But, even before then, I always felt kind of insecure. I remember, when I was little, laying in bed at nighttime and having these thoughts of, what's out there? What does forever mean? And, these really weird, dumb thoughts. But maybe everybody has those. I don't know. But it would make me sad. Like, what does it mean when somebody dies and that's just forever? What does that mean? And so I always kind of had that. And I don't know if it was a, predisposition for sadness thinking or not. But anyway, so trying to fit in was my thing. And so when I actually did play football, we had a pretty good team. It was in Pop Warner Little League football. But I wasn't the starter. I just wanted to be part of something. And it seemed like all the other kids were always a little bit more advanced than me, and not only in physical, but also in their thinking. And so I always found safety around adults. So and I had some very good coaches that were just take you aside and just say yeah, you're okay. And so when I got into high school, I've been very fortunate and very blessed at times and at critical times. And I've also had some, at critical times, things that happened to me that you say, oh, if that just wouldn't have happened, a different result. And so one of those things that was a coach, we got a new coach when I was a junior in high school, and I became the starter. And this guy was the tough guts guy. He's like, here's how it's done. We're buzzing our hair. When we're dressing up and putting all our uniform on before we get on the bus, because when we get off the bus, we're not that big. I want them to see with our pads on, so you think we're big. And I learned when I got knocked down, I got back up again, and I was kind of rewarded for it. It was like, praise for that. And all of a sudden that became my thing, was I'm tough. And I found out I was pretty tough. Maybe sensitive inside, but I was tough. I could take a hit. In fact, I kind of enjoyed that challenge. I had a mini bike, motorcycles, a 150, 120. It was a Hodaka way back when. And I'd take challenges, see if you can't run through this thing. But I really loved a challenge and proving. I don't know if I was trying to prove to myself or I was trying to prove to others, that I could meet that challenge. And so that became kind of my mantra, really. And so when I got to, I had one scholarship offer to Utah State University. And when I got there, I was kind of told, how they do with recruits. You're the guy, we're really looking at you. And I got there and I found that they had 3 other quarterbacks they brought in, they recruited. I'm going, oh man, and these other guys could throw the ball. I mean, I never was a drop back passer. These guys could throw the ball. And I'm going, oh man, I'm going to get through this. And I was coming off, this is one of those things that happened at Pinnacle Times. Just about a month before that, we were out on a dune buggy out by the Kern River out in the desert in California. And we'd been out all night, four-wheeling or whatever you want to call it. But on the way home, we flipped the dune buggy and it went out over the water. I wasn't driving. And fractured my skull, blew an eardrum out. And I woke up in the hospital. I almost had like an out-of-body experience because I could see myself sitting down in the river in the water. It went about 30 feet out and went down the bottom of the river. And so I was fortunate there. But I woke up and just this screaming noise and pain in my ear. And so I fractured the skull, had fluid leaking out of it. And the neurologist said, he's never going to play football. And so my dad fired him and got another neurologist that came in and said, oh yeah, I'll sign off on it, so, he'll be okay. At that point in time, I was a quarterback, so I'm not going to get hit like every play. Anyway, so I went to Utah State, and so that first year was kind of tough because I was seeing stars and things like that. But when I got my chance to start, we had a new coach that came in, so this is my redshirt freshman year. Got my chance to start, and I became a 4-year starter. And my junior year, I got injured, my shoulder, and they had brought in a new quarterback named Craig Bradshaw, which is Terry Bradshaw's little brother. I say little, he was bigger than Terry, but again, here's this guy, physical specimen, could throw the ball 80 yards. I mean, unbelievable. But he didn't like to get hit, and so he just didn't have that piece to him, right? And so I survived that and ended up getting drafted. He also got drafted, by the way, but probably didn't really by name. But in that draft, I mean, that was it. I ended up going the 4 years. We won the championship my junior and senior year, and that injury kind of, I worked my way through it. But so after my college year and going into the pros, I played in a bowl game and blew my knee out. And so here it is again, just before something happens, as this thing happens. And I actually flunked a physical at one of the teams they flew me out to look at because I had fluid in my knee. And so it knocked me down in the draft. I didn't know I was going to get drafted. And that was the piece, it was like, all this stuff that's happened, what does it mean? But I got drafted by Detroit. So I kind of snuck in here. Billy Sims was the first round draft choice, and so I got drafted. Man, it was fantastic. I mean, I remember that happening. It was wow, I got drafted.
So this is an incredible story already of perseverance. So you're a gentleman that any obstacle that's come up to you, it almost fires you up. It almost fuels you up. That every time there was a challenge or your inner doubt started to speak in your ears, like, this guy's bigger than you, he can throw the ball better than you, he might be the one that's supposed to be successful, maybe you're not as good. You always rose to the occasion. The thing that's kind of miraculous about already hearing this much of your story is the gentleman that I was telling you about before the podcast, Josh Parisian. Yeah. He has like the same story. He's the guy that didn't really play sports growing up. Everybody kind of counted him out, you're not going to be the guy that makes it to the top. And now he's the only heavyweight in Michigan in the UFC. And hearing your story already, just up to this point, there are so many similarities in the fact that perseverance is just the quality that trumps almost everything, because you're just able to endure what most people would crumble under. The pressure that, it's just, okay, I took this really bad injury, I crashed, I'm done. That was my chance, but here's my excuse. It's the doorway out, and now I don't have to be successful. I don't have to carry the pressure of success. This happened to me. You just always rise to the occasion. Let's talk a little bit about that moment when you are drafted. You're going to play in the NFL. From that young man who thought, I'm a little bit slower, I'm behind, I'm not as good as this guy, I'm not as physical as this guy, they can throw the ball like that. you get drafted. Really, it's a dream come true. It's a dream that so few people would achieve. What does that time of your life look like? Can you shift back to that perspective? What was that young man like? Did you begin to take things for granted? Were you overwhelmed? And let's talk a little bit about your NFL career, and then let's start turning the chapter, and let's talk about the good things that were in your mental state at the time and some of the bad.
Yeah. Well, the draft is completely different today than it was back then. I was sitting around and living in a 10 by 50 trailer and, waiting for the phone call to ring, basically. And then the first round went by, second round went by, third round, oh man. So I guess it's true, my injury, I kind of passed on me. And then I got a phone call, and it was the coach that said, this is Coach Clark. We're going to take you in the next round. You'll be the first pick of the fourth round. And I said, who's this? Ken? And he said, Coach Clark, Detroit Lions. And my heart kind of skipped a second. I knew nothing about Detroit, man. I was West Coast, everything else. And I was almost disappointed that it wasn't like, oh, Seattle calling me, or something like that, right? But all of a sudden it hit me. Oh my gosh, here it is. I got my shot. The first thing, I was just excited about that. Right immediately to all of a sudden this anxiety came in as well, which is, okay, you got your shot. Okay, now what are you going to do? And so I was married at the time. I got married as a junior in college. We'll talk about that another time, but I think it has a lot to do with depression. But anyway, that moment right there was just like, oh. So I thought back, on all the guys that, that I'd beat or that were ahead of me, like when I was in junior high. I was a late developer. I had to take their crap, and everything else, and kind of a tag along. And the good quarterbacks in my area, they went to the 4A schools because they were Catholic schools, so they actually got recruited out of junior high, to go to those schools. And so one went to SC, one went to San Jose, and I had my one scholarship to Utah State. And so now here I'm getting drafted, man. And it was just a little bit of elation, kind of surreal, and that was the beginning of really an incredible journey, into the pros.
So let's fast forward to that time. So what does the pros look like? What does that time of life look like for you? Like you said you're in a relationship that really wasn't enhancing the quality of your life. And that's a big thing with people. I see a lot of the young court kids that I work with that struggle, or just a lot of people in general. If they have relationships in their lives that are just sucking the energy out of them, man, even people that I believe have a pretty good life can be very empty, can be very depressed, can struggle a lot with mental state. And I'm not ever saying that it's only because of the external people. Sometimes we're the problem too, and we might not be able to admit that. But let's talk a little bit about what was that decade of your life like? What were the relationships in your life? What did you learn from that aspect of your life that you now carry with you now?
Well, first of all, on the marriage part, I got injured, like I said, that junior year, and I missed a whole quarter of school. I just couldn't get out of bed. It's just it was off season, but I just couldn't.
It's understandable.
So, yeah, and I ended up, I was seeing this girl and stuff, and okay, this is great. Let's get married. Like she was the talk, and she was Mormon, and. So I said, okay, well, how about like a year or two? You know what I mean? Well, no, if we don't get married, then I'm not going to date you anymore. And it was like, what is that? That doesn't even make any sense. But, I was in that spot where I think, lonely, kind of, isolated, maybe still depressed. I don't know. But, I held on to it. And so that was the really onset. And my dad and my brother were so mad at me, don't do it. And I think that drive in me said, oh, you're telling me not to do it? Then I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? It was like...
You're just someone that proves people wrong?
And I proved them, it's like in the day after marriage when we're driving to, on our honeymoon, we're going to Tahoe and I'm driving and I realized, oh my gosh, what have I done?
You already knew in your soul it wasn't the right move.
Yeah, but I'm committed, and I'm going to do the best with it. So when I came back, out here when I was drafted, I came back out here. I was by myself. She didn't even want to come out this way. Anyway, so that was the beginning of it. And so relationship wise, I came. It was just it was conflicted. That part of it was on the personal side. But out of that came two great kids that loved dearly and stuff. And so we made it 10 years worth in that, and almost my whole pro career. But getting here was just oh man, opportunity. I was cut. I was in shape, man. I would look like a linebacker, man. And they're looking at me like, we've never seen a quarterback like this before, you know what I mean? But that's what I was. I like to hit, and I like to be physical, and I ran a 4.740, which isn't great speed, but it was, back then it was pretty good speed, especially for a quarterback. And then, the way things fell, I was a holder, so I at least got on every game in my rookie year, with Eddie Murray, who's, all pro and Super Bowl ring now because he played forever. He played like 20 years. Anyway, so I was on the field every play. So at least got to do that. But then going into the second year is when I got my start, and that's where things changed dramatically. First start was on Monday Night Football. The starting quarterback had a book in his hand. They played the second team quarterback who sucked, and so I got my start. No, he really did. And I was kind of happy, to be honest with you. I was like, oh, God, this guy sucks. Yay! So they called me up at the beginning of the week and said, you're starting next week Monday Night Football against Chicago Bears. Now, up to this point, I was the third team, so that means I didn't get any practice. And so here we go. I got 1 week worth of practice, going to be on the biggest stage because back then Monday Night Football was huge. My parents get a chance to watch the game. My friends get a chance to watch the game. My college people get to watch the game. Everybody's going to be watching this game. Whew, this is it, right? That day was so long because we started at 9 o'clock. That's what time the game time was. And so that whole freaking day was just anxious, anxiety. Want it to start now, but no, not ready. I want it to start now. No. It goes, the butterflies and everything else that goes on. I remember getting on my knees, and next to the bed and just saying, make it, so just get me through this thing is basically what I was asking for, right? Anyway, so then the first play was a pass, completed, and it was like 40-yard pass. The place erupted. And then I don't remember very much the rest of the game because it was just so fast. The jump to NFL is so quick. It is, people are just flying. It's like every play is like a car crash. It really is, especially if you're not used to the pace. But I threw a 94-yard touchdown pass in that game, and standing in the end zone, actually got knocked down, so I had to get back up. But he was crossing, our end zone, touchdown, and the place was wild. And I remember just standing there, just kind of took it all in and just said, wow, I made it. I did it, And it was just that elation that you have. It's just like, oh, the hair in the back of your neck and just the chills and just like, everything, all the struggle and everything else poured into this one moment and just said, I did it, And then we went on and won 48-17. And then life changed. I was kind of an inward, guy, even though today, people look at me as gregarious and everything else, and I've always had that side to me. But really, when it comes to interviews and talking to people about personal stuff, I'm not very good at it. And so now I've got the cameras in my faces and everything else, and it was a totally different story, from that point forward.
So now there's a huge shift that happens because somewhere in your psychology, you just unlocked a door. You stepped through a new doorway where all of a sudden you are worthy and you made it. And you're the gentleman that despite any setback, despite anything that life threw your way, you are successful. You are standing in, Ford Field at the time.
Yeah.
And
Silverdome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Silverdome. Yeah, so you're in the Silverdome at the time. And I mean, like you said, you have a crowd erupting around you because of your performance or, in part of your performance. It's incredible. That moment has got to be so burned in your memory. Like, for what most people would only relate to, like, I don't know, something terrible, like the 9/11. I remember exactly where I was, you remember that moment. And with that being said, now all of a sudden there's a huge shift in your mindset because you are worthy. You did make it. You are the guy. There's no more, will I ever start and be successful in this game? You got down on your knees that day and said, please let it happen, and now you're there. So let's talk about a little bit.
It's funny that you say that, but because you'd think that's how it would be, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think I slept at all because it was just, I made it, yeah. But then, the next day when you go in and watch film, I'm going, oh, I really didn't play that great. Not in my head. Everything was perfect. You look at it on film and I made a lot of mistakes. Woo, but made some really big plays. So it was emotional more than it was, technical. And so those doubts came in again. Okay, so now am I was that just a fluke? It's so crazy.
Sure, your mind starts like basically sabotaging you and saying, "Hey, who's to say you are that good yet? You don't get to celebrate yet."
Exactly right. Yeah. So it was like trying to find my feet under that. To be the leader, I can lead on the field. I can do it all. But how's that leader not when you're in the locker room? Are people looking at me to be this guy to step up now? Or so. There's a lot of things going on with coaches and everything else at the time as well. But anyway, it didn't last long like you'd think it would.
So now pressure compounds, right? Because now you're in the spotlight more than you've ever been.
Yeah.
You're not just sitting on the bench going like, hey, I'm a part of this team. I made it here. You're in the spotlight, which requires a whole nother level of conviction in your character and things like that, So let's talk a little bit about just the mental health struggles that you went through when you're in the NFL, and then when the NFL ended. How did that come to an end? And then at that point, what does your life look like, immediately after? And then let's say the next year beyond that point, because for someone that's experienced such a high, such a peak in life, usually there tends to be valleys. It's just the way that life works. You know what I mean? We tend to, if you had a great experience here, well, you better make sure you can endure through this experience.
And James, thanks for giving the time to kind of relive and go through that stuff. So I'll fast forward I went through 3 head coaches, 5 offensive coordinators. So every year you got to learn another offense every other year. And so towards the end of that, I was known for my physicality, and towards the end, I started getting beat up. The rules are quite different than they are today. And I found myself, I broke an ankle, had a plate in it, I broke my thumb, got a pin in it, 3 elbow surgeries, a couple knees, and so at the end of it, I came back my 10th year, got my starting job back about mid-season against Minnesota, and just sucked. Man, it was like, they blitzed me. I couldn't get out of the way. I got ran over, basically, is what happened. And so they called me in the office the next day, and they cut me. They actually gave me an option. You can retire so you can have a press conference, but if you don't, we're going to cut you. So it's like, oh, well, I'll take the press conference. The problem with that means that I made a statement that says I'm retiring. That means no other team's looking. And, but I had 10 years. This is one of the goals I had. So I was okay with that. So I thought, But, going home after the press conference and sitting there, especially when the season's still going on, it was just, I was lost. It was devastating. Biggest thing that popped in my head was, who am I? What am I going to do now? I've been doing this since, I was 9 years old, really.
It's your entire identity. People know you as you're the football star, and that's how you've built your confidence in your life. Yeah. So now that's stripped. What does that look like?
Well, it's pretty complicated. I made some changes. I went through divorce, went and got my pilot's license. The girlfriend that I was seeing, we took a trip for about a month and a half driving around the country, which was fantastic. It's something I've always wanted to do, so I got to do that. But it was on that drive back, oh shit, here it is. Okay, who am I? What am I going to do? I got to start a job. I got to start something. And that was the hardest part, not knowing what to do next. Going into somebody and making a sales call, and they're looking at you like, well, don't you have a ton of money? What are you doing here? And just having that being told to you is, well, no, I don't have a ton of money, those years. And I need to work, that's why I'm here. But I didn't know, I've done lots of things in the off seasons, but I didn't have a real skill. Got a degree, didn't have a real skill. And so and that part was the hardest part, is trying to figure out who I was. I ended up starting a business and pouring myself into it. But with that came a lot of entertainment and stuff like that. And so, alcohol, which has always been, fun in my life, continued to be so in that area, but a lot more social, dealings and entertainment and stuff like that went along with it. But about 6 years into that is when the doors kind of started wobbling a little bit. Had problems with the business. Our carrier left. I lost 80% of my business like overnight. And then of course, it's my fault. I feel like I'm to blame. I didn't see it coming. How am I going to take care of my family? And all those things started happening, and it really culminated in driving. My wife was driving the car. We were going down to the airport, and I just felt like I was taking a business trip. I just felt like I couldn't go, and I jumped out of the car. We were going 75 miles an hour, and I jumped out, and I didn't get run over, but went to the side of the highways, but I don't remember any of this stuff, Needless to say, my wife wasn't really happy. So, what are you doing? But then I woke up in the hospital, and she was there with a psychiatrist, and my parents had flown in from California.
Man, so yeah, I talked about peaks and valleys right before you went into that. You experienced an incredible high, and then you were truly at one of the lowest points you can be. You probably don't know much of my background story, but my mother committed suicide when I was young, and she struggled with mental health issues. And I always wondered, like, what does that moment look like? How would someone describe what it's like to be in there? Because I understand being helpless and feeling hopeless. Like, I've had some dark times in my life, but is it the fact that you just there's no roadmap for you anymore? All of a sudden, there's a million potentials for you, but you don't even know who you are. You don't know what's gonna what does that moment look like?
The main driving factor, and God rest your mom, but I'm sure this is her driving factor as well, and I don't know the story, but it is that you think that your family will be better off without you. And that's the driving factor behind that, which is you're so messed up and so lost that they'll be better off if you're not around anymore. And so that's really the driving factor that causes that to happen. And so when I woke up in the hospital and I'm still here, it's like, oh, shit, how do I explain this? I declined, help with the psychiatrist. I said, no, I'm fine. It was just something, whatever it was. And, I was messed up, whatever. But, I'm fine now. Let's get past it. And it became kind of a joke, because the paper just said Hipple fell out of a car. They didn't know that I jumped. My wife had taken the note. I wrote, a quick note and handed it to her before I jumped. Anyway, so that was, so hey, put it behind you and keep moving forward. Put the blinders back on and here we go. That didn't happen, so I'm going to have to do something different and make it work. And so I did. I dove right back into business, and that would be, I guess, the medication side of it would be, I'll just work myself right here. I'll get myself out of it this way.
So you basically consumed yourself with something else so that you didn't just, get consumed again by what you were dealing with. So that's the way you phrase that is it's fascinating, and I'm going to probably look into it further, but basically you just get to the point where you don't know how to solve the problems and you don't want to put the type of chaos that you're enduring on other people. And so it's just a helpless feeling. It's a hopeless feeling. It's what? Things would be easier this way. There's not unknown. It's a known.
Yeah. And it's not easy to come to that mindset because it plays in your head for a long period of time. It's not usually something, even what I did, it looked like it was really impulsive, but there had been thoughts there a lot, right? And that was just the time I didn't think I could go forward with it. So
you had gone through a lot of tough things, and your life was building to a tipping point, and that jumping out of the car was the tipping point. That was finally when it was like, enough is enough. I just can't go anymore. I can't endure anymore. My family's not going to go through anymore. I'm done with this ride.
Yeah, and that's a tough deal to deal with, and I didn't deal with it very well. Like I said, I just threw myself back into work. The problem with that was, was my son, who's 15 years old. He'd live with me, and then for summer times, and he'd go back up to Utah and live with my wife, and then so he was going back and forth. And then he came, lived with us 1 year. He was struggling, so he lived with us for a year. Then went back there. Then he came back with us, and this is the year that he died. I'll be honest with you, I didn't know exactly how to be a father to a 14-year-old. You know what I mean? I really didn't. In my head was be this thing that your father was to you because he was always there, but I didn't know how. You know what I mean? And I was still stuck in my own crap and stuff, and not healthy myself. And so when he started struggling, hey, we'll get through this. I thought I knew what he was feeling, and I didn't. And so when he suicided dramatically, and I got the phone call.
Is this before or after the car incident?
This is after. And that was the crushing moment for me right then, was because when I got the phone call, and my wife said, Jeff is dead, and she explained the circumstances to me. My mind immediately went to, oh my God, I got it, I understand it, and that scares. How did I let this happen? Because I understood that mindset, right? And why didn't I catch it? Why didn't I see it in him? And so that part was just the part that was just like a stab in the heart, because I know better. And I know what that feeling is, and why didn't I not see it? And so when I flew home and saw him in the morgue, it was I think that point right there was the deciding point of I'm going to live because I feel like dying right now, but I know what it feels like. And the aftermath, the people aren't better off. It just creates a lot more pain, and now the people that you leave behind have to bear that pain, and that's not it's not why people die by suicide. They don't want to leave pain behind. They want people to be better.
Peace.
Peace, yeah. Burdensome feeling. I feel like a burden to you, right? So I'm going to relieve you of this by taking. So anyway, and so that was my decision to live, but I didn't know how to live with this pain, so I just, started drinking a lot, and anything I get my hands on, really. Some illicit drugs, some, Xanaxes, Ambiens, mostly alcohol.
Just anything to try to escape the reality.
Be numb.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you truly, that moment with your son is probably a true rock bottom, but then you stayed on the bottom for a long period of time where you just didn't know how to climb up yet.
Yep, and I didn't know how to climb up, and I didn't. I still continued working, and so between that and that, I really wasn't paying much attention to what was going on until I got picked up on a DUI, and served the time in jail because it was supposed to be a diversion program, but they didn't divert me. I don't care, right? So I ended up in jail for 60 days out of a 90-day sentence, and then. Actually, it was a full 90 days with time served. But so that was my moment getting out. I want answers and changes. And so when I came out of that, that thing clicked on me again, which is, hey, find out what happened. And so I ended up going to the University of Michigan Depression Center. A great man there named Dr. John Graydon, who kind of did outreach to me and kind of brought me involved. And so got treatment, understood things. They hired me as an outreach person. So I sat on every, grand rounds, every every possible thing I could sit in on and learn, all the different classes and speeches and stuff like that, all the latest research to try and learn all this stuff. And I started doing outreach and started building, on that. And I want to change things. And so that's where the drive started coming from. So the same drive I had back in football. All of a sudden became this. Yeah.
It's so funny. I was about to say those words. I was going to say you basically found your drive again, and you found a fascination in something new that you realize there's power in. That you have the ability to help people. You know what I mean? You've been in an extremely dark situation, and when we do help other people, or at least when we can empathize on a real level and we can affect change, it's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly.
It is. This last year. Couple things happened to me. One was negative, but the most positive thing that happened to me was my Alma Mater, Utah State University, brought me back and had me speak to this, at the convocation, and I received an Honorary Doctorate, not because of a football player, but because of the work I've done in mental health. And to me, that was just like gold. I mean, that was more important than the football career.
That's a new defining moment.
Yeah. It was, but so the gap in between there was really interesting because I had this really weird perspective on mental health. Suicide prevention was my main thing, but mental health, because now let's talk about mental health, get rid of stigma, depression, here's the biochemical things that happens. And one of the things I ended up doing is trying to form programs around hard to reach populations. So athletes, military, law enforcement. I even, I went to 20 of the prisons around Michigan and on behalf of their EAP and was talking to the line officers and to the staff. Because they bring a whole lot home, and it's the environment they're in all day long. And so it was really rewarding, but one of the biggest rewarding things that I ended up doing was U.S. Fleet Forces. I did the Department of Defense Suicide Prevention conference, lead speaker. I was scared to death, man. 3,000 people in uniform, all branches, whoa, but I did that. And then they hired me to start doing workshops. And so for over the course of 11 years, all the bases, over in Europe and East Coast and West Coast. And so it was, I learned a lot about military from that side of it. And then that's where it really kind of grew into this transitional thing. What happens when they transition is not that much different, than when we transition. Now, there's a lot of difference in what we do, but the transition is the same. Identity, uniform, loss of, structure, loss of support systems, and all that stuff that goes with it.
So do you think that mental health is a thing that is absolutely lacking in post-athletics for high-end players or like military? Because there's a mental health epidemic in this country. The amount of people that are struggling with mental health is unprecedented, or at least it was never talked about before. And I think you're really onto something where the transition periods in life, when someone's happy and they have an identity at some point and you got a career and you're on top of the world and you're either making good choices or bad choices, it's easier to kind of at least exist. Even if there's problems in there, you can try to kind of float by. But those transition points, when someone is done with athletics or someone gets out of the military service, that's a dangerous moment because there's a like you said, a recreation of who you are that has to take place, and that can go the wrong route. So you've been involved in a program that's directly working with people that are transitioning from the military and athletes, or you're sent out to different speech. How does that work?
Well, I have. With the University of Michigan, we're doing psychiatric evaluations on players that were like either suicidal or really in trouble, and then trying to find them work. So that was kind of the building of that program. But through the work of the military, I decided, well, there's a lot going on here that might be similar, so why not put them both together? And so we did that over at, it's called After the Impact. Eisenhower is where we started it. Put the program together over there so we'd have, these two groups together in a 30-day program. And boy, it really worked well. I mean, the communication was wide open. They didn't, isolate. They asked each other questions. And to me, if you think you're the only one going through something, it's really hard, to get through it because who do I talk to? But if I sit across somebody who, I respect and stuff, and maybe I watched them play, or maybe on the player's point, this guy went to war for us, then we ask questions. And so that was the launching part for that. So then it's just been about trying to find answers, trying to find the best treatment center. So I've done, hyperbaric, I've done fast recovery programs. I've looked at off-label TMS. Center for Neurological Studies does a lot for concussion and head injury, because don't forget, when I was pushing down the mental health angle, all of a sudden the NFL came out and announced in 2009, oh, by the way, concussions, it can have long-lasting consequences. So every player out there, all of a sudden, the things they might have felt from transition and mental health started identifying, yeah, that's what it is. It's got to be that, because, it can't be mental health. It's got to be that. And so guys started coming out of the woodwork.
Do you see common denominators in the people that are really struggling with their mental health, or certain ingredients that tend to lead to it more? Or did you notice that it was a pretty vast problem, it's just not spoken about as much? Or were there like defining factors you were like, these things are likely to make someone struggle?
I think the number one thing that makes a person struggle is the unknown, and so lack of understanding. So lack of knowledge in that area. So if I don't know, that transition can be like a trauma. Everybody knows, trauma, here's the steps you take to go through trauma debriefing, and here's what we do about it. But if I don't know that, and I just lost my identity, lost my support system, lost my livelihood, lost all these things, and now I'm disconnected from it completely, that's pretty traumatic. But we don't see it as that. We just said, oh, you just lost your job. Oh, you just left the military. And so if I don't know the effects it's going to have, where I'm going to have sleep problems, I'm going to feel lost, I'm going to feel like, surreal at times, like what's going on. I'm going to feel disconnected from the support systems that I have. My relationships are going to change because I'm not in control anymore. Those things are real, but they can also be normalized and say, that's a normal step. And so if you go through those things and understand it when you're going through it, you got a lot better chance of not getting lost and start disease building and saying, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm the only one going through this. And all of a sudden I start going into depression. I start isolating. I start drinking. I start going down this really dark pathway because I feel like I'm the only one and nobody understands it.
I 100% understand what you're saying. You just painted a picture in my mind. And honestly, the education before the transition process would be massive. You have to get to these people and say, listen, this is going to take place and you're very likely to encounter these things, but you're not alone. And it's going to be all right. And here's many stories of success. You might go through a rough period, but you're going to rediscover a new chapter. Even though one chapter's might be closing, and you may have feelings of nostalgia and wish that those times were here to stay. You have a beautiful new chapter that you can write, because since the NFL, you've done probably a lot of things you're very proud of. Like you said, that day you received that honorary doctorate was an incredible moment.
Yeah. Every one of these programs I've been involved in, and helping others, I just feel as like I said, the fact that, I survived through this stuff and I'm here today for where I'm at is I've got a great family. I mean, everybody's come back around. I mean, my daughter's done well. All three daughters have done well, especially with what happened. But I just feel that part of it. But the thing is, we are so resilient. Human beings are so resilient. But if we're not told that we are, or not, if we don't understand what is happening to us because these things are normalized, right? And this is not to strike out against treatment, because treatment works. I mean, but the idea of saying, if you have a mental health issue, go get treatment. Good luck with that. You know what I mean? First of all, there's never enough therapists, and never going to be enough therapists, especially if I'm going to them because I had a breakup with my girlfriend. I feel depressed. Well, you don't know that you're going to feel this way? No, I don't. What's wrong with me? I just don't want to come out of my room. And I'm not minimizing a breakup. I'm just saying that you will get through that. But understand that you're going to feel crappy for a while, right? And that's many things that happen through transition. If I know that this is a normal process, I can endure and get through it. And I think that's the part. Is there somebody there that's a support person that you believe in, that says they could be there with me through this? And it says, hey, they're pulling for me, so when I get through this thing, they're still there for me. And I think that's what we can do as individuals for people that are going through transition, because we need it when we go through it. Why not be there for somebody when they're going through it? Whether it's a breakup, a divorce, a transition, a move, from military, an officer that goes through a traumatic event, all those things, right? They're all part of this resilience game, and just having a quick plan, what does it look like and what's going to happen?
100%. And honestly, I mean, people can be there for each other more. It doesn't need to be a therapist. It doesn't need to be some trained specialist. Sometimes just having someone that is willing to sit there, that empathizes with your pain a little bit, that's willing to talk to you, that gives you that light at the end of the tunnel feeling, like knowing we can do a better job as people, knowing that like a lot of people struggle with mental health issues. And if we normalize those conversations more and we have this type of challenging dialogue, I think it promotes a healthier society mentally, because this society compares people so much, and you only look at other people's highlight reels. You see other people at their absolute best. They're this. You don't see that they're a human being the same as you that goes through struggles.
And I think we've done a really great job of destigmatizing, serious mental health issues. Bipolar illness, deep depression, chronic depression. We've done a great job of destigmatizing those, but we haven't done a very good job of in the middle saying, sorry,
no problem.
Got excited, used my hands, knocked the microphone away. Of saying this part is normal. You're going to be down. You're not going to be happy all the time. In fact, that would be terrible to be happy all the time, because you have nothing to compare it with. So life is about this ups and downs that you go through, but understanding that for every low that you go through, you can learn something from it and actually utilize that for the next wave of happiness you're going to have, because where you find joy at. And so I think that part of education is missing. And how we connect with each other isn't about always getting around and complaining about stuff, right? It's about being there empathetically. We all have emotions. We all understand what sad is, happy is, angry is, disgust, and joy. We all have those core, right? And so if I can connect with you at a core, you can empathize with me because you feel me, because you've been there before, right? I might not be able to, our stories might not be the same. I mean, your story where you came from, where I came from, might be totally different. If I try to compare stories, it doesn't work. But if I can compare with how I feel about that story, where that emotion comes from, and now what I would do about it, those things are common.
Incredibly spot on, man. And even before the podcast, before you and I even started speaking, when I met you at the door, one of the things I was excited about is I literally said, I know that you've experienced really tough times in life and really good times in life, so you have a broad perspective, and I have the same. You know what I mean? And those stories, even though they're vastly different, I was a professional fighter. I fought around the world. My mother committed suicide. You were an NFL player. You played for the Detroit Lions, but you had suicide hit your life hard. We're human beings that are going through this interaction, and we have common ground. And when we recognize that common ground and we interact together, it makes things a little bit better. You know what I mean? And this story could inspire someone else that is not sitting here with us today that could hear that and go, you know what? If those two gentlemen got through what they went through and they made their lives a little bit better and they turned things around, and there are answers.
Yes.
It gives you hope. So let's talk for a second about...
That's the number one thing for me. Again, I told you, the burdensome feeling and stuff like that. It's the hopelessness that where people get into that burdensome feeling, and that things aren't getting any better. If they're not getting any better, then I'm going to live the rest of my life like this. What is it going to do to the people around me that I love? Drag them down? No. So hope is like one of the biggest things that can save lives, and just, instilling a little bit of hope. Stories can do that, right? But like you said, there might be a vast amount of people that are hearing this and saying, oh, well, yeah, may not be the same story, but the fact is overcoming and getting through things, that you're not alone in these emotions. They come from somewhere, but we can do something about it. And I think, that's the point you're making, I think, that I'm trying to make as well, which is, yeah, we can, but being alone is a terrible thing, but how we connect is important.
And we're a lot more similar than we are different. Our society kind of trains people to look at each other for differences, and then, that kind of makes you feel alone. Whereas if you look at the other people living this experience, that's a human being just like you, that was born to parents somewhere, that has a background story, that has hopes and dreams, that has fears, that has problems. It's a human being. And when you connect like that and you see the similarities in us, like you said, through your emotions, pull out the story. The story doesn't have to be the same. Yeah. You're a human that's going through ups and downs. Yeah. And when you look at that, every human being on this planet has gone through ups and downs, and sad and happy and good and bad. So it starts to promote hope. That's why it starts to make you go, you know what, I can do it too. If you think about how many times in your life the challenge is why you rose to the occasion. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because someone told you, you might not be good enough at this, and you said, oh yeah, you'll see.
And I think one other educational piece that's important is actually understanding what mental health is, right? We live in a comparative society. In other words, right now, it's all about comparison. Am I as happy as that guy? Do I have the same things that he has? And if I don't, then that means I should be down. I don't have those things. Or you're different than I am, and so I have to, change, not accept those differences in a way that's bound to our emotional core. It's because your story isn't matching my story, and so we're comparing stories rather than comparing the emotion content of what a human being is.
2 days ago on my podcast, I was interviewing a gentleman called Mike Ramsdell, who just said the exact same thing as you. And the way he said it is, we basically create illusions in our mind of what we believe someone to be, or what we believe we need to be able to just allow ourselves to be happy, to be successful. And they're illusions. They're not real. You're just creating these stories that is making you feel some way that you don't deserve to feel. So when you learn to unwind that stuff, there's a lot of, growth in that. So I want to turn this to, how did you meet Josh Parrish? How did you get involved with Vet Life? Have you guys done any joint ventures together? Just let's talk a little bit about that connection, because that's how you're here today.
So Josh is, first of all, he's a brilliant guy. And for the first moment you meet him, you can see very sincere, very, honest, go forward, and wants to get things done, and doesn't like, all the peripheral crap either, right? But I met him through a guy named Ronnie Cyrus. Ronnie, a good friend of Josh's, is actually the transition assistant advisor in Michigan for all veterans. But he also does, the color guard and the local hometown hero for the Detroit Lions. And that's where I met Ronnie, through that, and met him. We became, it sounds silly, but Facebook friends, because Ronnie found my book in an isolated camp in Africa when he was stationed there. And it's called Real Men Do Cry. And he read it, so he came back and he reached out to me on Facebook. I connected with him. I saw him down at the stadium. We started talking, saying hello. I started getting more involved in his stuff and what he does, because that's another avenue of an area here locally. Forget about going to all the different bases and stuff. This is with veterans and that transitional piece, which is, I get that, because I talk to players all day long that are that way, that have transitioned, and they're stuck. You know what I mean? And anyway, so that became, and so then I met Josh, got involved with the Michigan Heroes Museum, up in Frankenmuth, a board member, and then, so Josh, his Vet Fest, had some engagement there, though I wasn't able to get on boots, on the ground at the Vet Fest, but planning on the next one coming up. But I started, talking with him and found out what he's about, and the records and all the stuff, the court systems he involved with. And then, so we're working on something right now that could potentially, the proposal's done, it's finished, but bring, telepsychiatry and whatnot to 250 veterans is what we're working on right now. And if that funding goes through, that would be fantastic. So it's a way for him to put his part on it with that. So it's not just about, there's tons of tons of telehealth out there. But combining it with actually, what do you do after, and get the guy, the resources available to him, the things that are owed to him through, when they sign that dotted line, that's set aside, how do they access that? And really to connect again, because it's that connection again, which, is that support system where you're not alone and you're part of it.
It actually makes perfect sense. I mean, you're helping ease the transition, but then you also need the person that gets you the resources to make the process easier. Because even if you start feeling a little bit better and you have to go through endless amounts of jump through this hurdle and problems left and right, it's going to be stressful. And stress tends to make everything in life a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
So
There's two parts that, and this is where Josh is really strong. There's a couple parts all the way through. I don't care if it's high schools, I don't care if it's law enforcement, I don't care if it's veterans, players, whatever it is. You have an upstream, which is this education thing that we're talking about, right? How do you normalize things? How do you bring them up? And so people are more resilient that way. But then there's a middle treatment for those that have to, that need treatment. But then there's the follow-up. What do you do afterwards? And that's the part that gets dropped off. How do you stay in touch and connect with them and keep them involved and provide? So hopefully this would bracket those things, and hopefully that'll be one answer. But, yeah.
So you've redefined yourself, Eric. I mean, the man that sits here today is an influencer, is a speaker, is someone that reaches out to people in need. It's someone that's a friend to a lot of people that you're probably helping change their lives and get them back on a good direction. That probably feels good. You have a new identity in the second chapter of your life, or whatever chapter we would name it. You know what I mean? The multiple chapters.
Just don't say the last chapter.
Yeah, no, exactly. But you've redefined yourself. So what do your goals look like? Let's say in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, like what are you still dreaming? You got goals in front of you. What do you see as yourself creating? Because, just hearing your story today, it's incredibly powerful. You are a gentleman that's experienced ups and downs in life, and you can have a very strong influence on people. Do you see yourself working mainly with the veteran community? Do you see yourself really working with a lot of athletes as well, or like kind of a 50-50 mix? What do your goals look like?
Well, 5 years ago, I started with the Detroit Lions, started a peer-to-peer outreach group, right? And so I feel like that thing's going really well now, and it's been identified. We rewrote the manual, we got the whole thing, so it's packaged, it's good to go. So I feel like I'm maybe reached the end of that. I started after the impact, for over at Eisenhower for players and veterans, and it kind of ran its course as far as my involvement in. And so what is the next chapter going to look like? First thing I had to do was finish one more thing that I was stuck in, and I went therapy for it, but had an incident last year that kind of threw me back, I kind of set back, and I really had to focus on this piece, which was, those stories you're saying that we create, narratives for ourselves, and all of a sudden, those things can get further and further, who we think we should be, and then how we see ourselves, and they were getting further and further apart, and I was stuck in this, I would say, complex grief that kept going back to my son, that I wasn't there for him. And then when my father died, that I was there for the week and a half, and he died 2 days after I left. But I had to go do a speaking engagement, and so I wasn't there to watch him pass away. And so between those two things, they just get further and further away, and they finally collapsed on me, and I had to step back. But focused really hard, so it's been a little bit over a year, on that part. So that's when I went and got the tattoo. Man, it says, "Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still and be." It's actually out of Psalms, but the part being with the lighthouse on it that I put there is a picture from a really good friend of mine who's been involved in mental health battles and stuff like that, and she wins her battles, but as an artist. And so this lighthouse, I put it on my chest here with a storm hacking around it, because I feel like I've kind of weathered that storm, and I'm in a place now that I can actually stand strong and stand stoic. I've been resilient, but here I am now, I can be a beacon. And so going forward, I hope to be that beacon. And my wife and I had ideas of, before COVID hit, that we'd go around and do different speaking engagements and enjoy some of this, right, time and stuff. And then COVID hit. So, go figure, right? But found resilience through that as well. And how do you communicate, and how do you reach out to other people? And there's a whole nother beginning in that aspect too. So So,
well, man, I mean, I've absolutely enjoyed sitting here with you today. You have an incredibly powerful story. This has been a phenomenal dialogue, and I think you have really good times ahead. I think you're going to influence a lot of people, and when they sit down and they see how much you've gone through, and yet you still bring this energy and you still bring this, this intensity for life, where you say, hey, I've been knocked out. I've had the life beat the shit out of me a couple of times, but I'm back up, and I'm going to be there to show people that I can be a beacon of hope. The way that you have that tattoo, like I said, I'm going to show this podcast to Ramsdale from 2 days ago. He's a documentary filmmaker, and he almost like quoted something so similar while speaking about illusions and learning to just be and detach from who you think you need to become and being just who you are and accepting that, and then going after life with vigor, and it's incredible that, he's an incredibly powerful person with a great story. You are as well. And yet there's so many similarities, you know what I mean? So this was truly a pleasure for me today.
And I don't want to eat, but I'll finish with this. Okay. My view of mental health, the true definition is a sense of well-being on who you are. It doesn't matter about diagnosis. It doesn't matter, anything else. It's a sense of well-being on who you are. Because if you're that way, you can be productive. You can be connected. You can have good relationships, healthy relationships, right? And you know who you are. But that doesn't mean it's easy. But that's the definition. And so that means discovery. That also means, acceptance. But it's that sense of well-being.
100%. I mean, I know people that society might deem as not successful or would, classify a certain way, that are incredibly happy human beings sucking the juice out of this life and loving the experience. And I know people on the opposite end of the spectrum that are considered extremely successful and well-off that are horribly miserable on antidepressants, that have nothing figured out. Really, the inner workings of the mind is everything. Yeah. You know what I mean? So you have to, and usually, unfortunately for people, they may think it's their circumstances or things like that. Normally it's internally that you got to fix, because I've seen people with nothing to show for themselves that are incredibly happy, and I've witnessed the opposite spectrum. So you got to do the work in here, and it's a difficult journey because it's an intangible, and we don't do as much education about it. It's easier to say, hey, go buy this car and get this house and you'll be happy than it is to say you need to sit down with yourself and really find out what
That almost falls into your lap with what you do in training wise and stuff, because in order for somebody to be successful in this, they have to be physically trained, of course, so we know what that is, but they also have to be mentally trained, because it's them alone going into this thing, right? The support he has outside the ring is there for him, but when he's in the battle, he's in the battle, right? And so it's his mind that's got to get him through it. So,
and like I said, Josh is the perfect example. He is the epitome of the word perseverance, and yet he's the one that made it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So you conquer your own inner demons. Like we had a conversation about our tattoos before. You conquer your inner demons and you conquer what's in here, and life opens for you. Now all of a sudden, when you are the beacon, when you are the energy that shows up and takes on challenge, you're unstoppable. Life becomes potential. Yeah. So, Eric, truly a pleasure today. Anything else that you just want to capture in this moment in time? We'll have this podcast forever. And then if not, we'll wrap this thing up.
Man, I feel like I met a new brother, and so I appreciate you. And great job. Thank you.
100%.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for being here with me today. We'll wrap this up. And, thank you again, Josh Parrish, for reaching out and setting this up. It was truly phenomenal.